Hi, Pete, and thanks so much for joining us today at Llamau's 2020 Impact event. We thought it'd be really good to have a conversation with you about youth homelessness. So excuse me if I look occasionally at my notes, because I've written a few questions down for you, and I hope we can have a really good conversation. So the first one I'd like to pose to you is, you know that at Llamau, we are daring to imagine a world without homelessness. So I'd like to know from you, why do you think investing in youth homelessness services is so important in terms of ending homelessness altogether?
Yeah, it's a good question, Sam. Thanks for having me. Look, this is an agenda that I've been trying to push for a while. We too often divide kind of youth homelessness services agendas, discussions, research even from wider homelessness agendas. But I'll come back, and I tend to come back to one study that I did back in 2014 with a large sample of single homeless adults. And what that study showed us was, look, for around 50% of those adults, single homeless adults, they'd become homeless before the age of 21. Their first homeless experience was as a young person. That tells us enough about the relationship between wider homelessness and youth homelessness. We cannot end adult homelessness or wider homelessness unless we intervene earlier with young people. And arguably what we want to do is remove homelessness from somebody's story altogether. So that one statistic tells me the crucial facts. But I will just go on a little bit. Is we've kind of looked at the data from that survey again very recently, because it's become such an important issue. And of the one group of adults who seem to face the most traumatic experiences, the worst times, when you actually look at their childhood experiences, almost all of those adults had been excluded from school at some point. They were more likely than not to have experienced homelessness as a child, and 3/4 of that particular group of adults had experienced had been in care. It tells us so much about the need to focus on youth homelessness and to really drive an agenda, intervention, support during childhood and youthhood.
Absolutely, and those figures are really staggering, aren't they? They're really, really stark. And it was really interesting when you talked about the number who were excluded from school as well. And I think that's why, for an organisation like Llamau, like our training and our learning services that we provide to young people, like Learning for Life and Summers Line, is so important, because we know it's absolutely crucial that if we aren't helping people to achieve and get to the point where they can get a job and sustain a job, then actually that impact of becoming homeless is even more likely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other side of that, and we're probably going to meander through your questions here, but the other side of that is, look, we have young people that we know are at risk and are likely to be disengaging from school. And again, we're talking about systems. School as a system is not often designed for all young people and how they learn, and it fails, and folk disengage. Look, so we've got those young people we know are disengaging, but as you know, Llamau, and I'm working with you guys to bring forward Upstream Cymru, and that's premised on the complete opposite side of that says there are a lot of young people in schools who there'll be stuff not going quite right at home, but school is okay. And we're borrowing Upstream Cymru from Geelong in Australia, as you know. And when they've undertaken their work with young people in schools, they did a survey of all the young people in school, and they identified the group at highest risk of homelessness because there was a lot of conflict at home. They're having to sleep away from home during the week, etc. More than 50% of those young people at highest risk of homelessness, school was okay. So we've got young people where we know things are going wrong in school, and that's an opportunity to identify a chance to intervene. But actually, Upstream Cymru uses this survey to identify other things that may be problematic and challenging for young people that can act as identifiers that let us intervene. So it's working with those we do know, and then using surveys, etc., to identify others at risk.
Absolutely. And that's another staggering statistic, isn't it? So that school is that safe place. And
Yeah,
I can think of a number of young people that we've supported at Llamau where school absolutely has been that safe place. And that they haven't wanted to let anybody know what's happening at home, because although things have been difficult at home, they also don't want to bring more problems into the family home either.
yeah.
So I suppose that leads really nicely on into early intervention and prevention services. And as you know, at Llamau, it's something that we've really focused on over the years, that we truly believe that they're really important services and that we should be providing them.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you can just help explain to everybody why you think early intervention and prevention services are so important in helping prevent youth homelessness.
Yeah, okay. So this reflects the fact that generally, in not just in Wales, but in the UK context and further afield, is when we've intervened, it's tended to be at point of what we would call crisis. You know, in the Welsh context, it's 56 days before an eviction, or is the parent saying you're leaving the house tomorrow or tonight. That's when we kind of identify, or we're able to intervene, because that's when we find out. And if all we're ever doing is intervening at crisis, one is focus facing more trauma, more harm. What we need to be doing is intervening that stage earlier, upstream. So it's identifying lower levels of risk. And that's what Upstream Cymru does, but it's also what the care system should be doing, etc. And we've got a whole heap of actions we can take. You know, so mediation, family mediation is kind of the bread and butter of Llamau's intervention services, and it's really effective at point of crisis. We know that, but it can be even more effective, the same sort of intervention, if we can just intervene earlier when the arguments start in the house rather than at the point of being asked to leave. So that's one set of interventions that need
Yeah,
to.
you're absolutely right there. And again, so many young people and parents have said to us time and time again that whilst mediation might not have ever ended the problems and the arguments they've had full stop, because let's face it, it's difficult sometimes being a teenager, it's difficult being a parent of a teenager, but mediation is something that actually helps give back to the young person and their parents the skills and the tools to actually deal with conflict themselves.
Yeah, no, that's it. And 100%. And it's worth also saying that we're still at kind of, it's targeted intervention, but it's still quite close to crisis. We need to go further upstream as well in terms of prevention. So then we're talking about some of the structural drivers of homelessness, full stop. So poverty is the main driver of homelessness, and it feels so intangible and so difficult for us to grasp. And so in the homeless sector, we tend to shy away from the discussions. But if we all do that, we'll never address it. And it's been so rife in conversations around COVID. But the drive to bring in policy measures, whatever it is, to address poverty and its impacts, has to be where we've got to get to. And then the other main driver is around our housing markets. If you don't have enough affordable housing, we cannot end homelessness. So those are kind of really upstream interventions that we need to be, they're really upstream areas that we need to act on if we're going to end youth homelessness.
That's great, Pete. Thank you. And it's good to end on an optimistic note that there is stuff happening in Wales, which is really, really positive. There's stuff that Llamau is very much involved with, and it's really great. And I think that we can certainly all make sure we put that youth-focused lens on ending homelessness. So thank you, Pete. Thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.